a commitment to show an unfiltered view of the before, during, and after of key events, live, as it happens. To defend the First Amendment using our rights of a free press. And to amplify the voices of underrepresented individuals including Black, Indigenous, persons of color, and the LGBTQIA+ community. Our team is committed to seeking equality for all and holding those in power accountable. The easiest way to support Malcontent News is to bookmark our website at malcontentnews.com, like and follow us on Facebook, subscribe to us on YouTube, and follow us on Twitter, Twitch, Instagram, and in the Google News app. To provide financial support, you can become a patron, make a one-time donation through Venmo, or link your Twitch account to your Amazon Prime account and use your free subscription to subscribe to Malcontent News. Thank you for supporting independent journalism and for being a malcontent.
Merry Christmas!
Good evening, Malcontents, and I am David the Malcontent, and welcome to another edition of Malcontentment Happy Hour. We've got a great lineup set up for you tonight. I want to go ahead and pull in our guest co-host, Jennifer Smith. Jennifer, how are you doing?
I am here, David. How are you? How are you?
Here in body and here in spirit and here in mind, and we are all benefactors of you. Welcome to your presence.
Oh, there's a lot of news today. A lot of news. Feels like
there is a lot of news today. Monday, since we've brought you on as our guest co-host, Mondays have been nuts. It's just crazy. And normally, what's happened before you were a co-host, we'd come on and be like, okay, we've got the lineup, and we've already kind of like announced it, but we're going to lead in. We got 3 stories that we could lead into as the just but. And we're actually 4 because we added a 4th one. So we're going to go ahead and jump into that and have our stories before the stories. And our first one takes us to Columbus, Ohio, where Adam Coy, the officer who shot dead Andre Hill, was fired today.
About time.
So, he was fired for gross misconduct. He was fired for using force when force wasn't appropriate, for not rendering aid after shooting somebody, for not turning on his body cam, and not following department procedures. I'm paraphrasing the 4 reasons that he was fired. He was, of course, represented by the police union in his defense, which is part of the problem in this country because his actions are pretty indefensible. But everyone does, deserve at least a little bit of a defense. I had a little bile come up as those words came up out of my mouth. But we are, as a country, innocent until proven guilty. So we have to apply this or we become what we don't like. That's my view.
This is true, but I also think, like the stack of allegations prior to his actions here that cost somebody their life probably should have prompted his firing a while ago. But that's just my take on the matter.
And this is really the valid point, and this really attaches into, again, the problem that police unions in particular bring into these situations. The unions are so powerful and have negotiated these really onerous contracts. And when I say onerous, they're onerous for city leaders. They're onerous for the citizens of the towns that they are protecting and serving.
Absolutely. And, had his actions been reprimanded long ago, he might not be in the need of defense at this particular moment.
And we wouldn't be talking about it right now. Now, the next step, as I understand it, is that a grand jury will be convened, and the grand jury will look at the body of evidence, as well as a federal investigation into possible civil rights violations. But you know, and I know, and our viewers know how typically those things go.
Yep. It's, spoiler alert, it's not going to go, the way it should go. More than likely. So, yeah. Go ahead.
The way that I understand that a grand jury works is that the grand jury doesn't have to be convinced of, guilt beyond reasonable doubt. The grand jury just has to be convinced that there's actually something worthy to go in front of a judge for the judge to then decide why, yes, I want to do an arraignment or not. That's like the bar's really low. The challenge comes into how the prosecutor presents the case. And as we saw in Nashville with Breonna Taylor, they never presented a case to the grand jury. Like, they literally didn't present a case.
Yeah. And it would not surprise me to see something similar occur here. So, people are only able to evaluate the evidence that is put before them. And if you're not putting enough evidence or any evidence at all in front of them, there's nothing for them to evaluate, and therefore no determination can be made. So you're really kind of putting them in a bind and not allowing them to do their duty as a grand jury. And it's just all the way around very egregious.
Well, we'll certainly be monitoring the story, and we'll see how this plays out. But we're not seeing parallels to what happened in, I keep pointing up to what happened in Texas about 2 months ago, and how quickly everything has moved there, from individual shot, investigation, fired, criminally charged with capital murder. In Texas, first-degree murder. They're not. They will almost certainly not face capital charges. But in Texas, first-degree murder is a potential capital crime. It was just boom, 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 48 hours, done. And I'll just say it again. I'm really confused on when did Texas become the bastion of police reform in the United States of America? It's almost baffling.
It is extremely baffling, considering it's like the birthplace of, things like the Texas Rangers. And, it's as a historian, it's equally mind-boggling.
You've come a long way, baby. Yeah. You still have a really long way to go. And that kind of moves into like our next story, which is one of these. You got to be kidding me. We set a new travel record on 12/27. USA, USA, USA.
Let me plug my ears. So it looks like 1.2, almost 1.3 million people flew on 12/27. And as we were talking about before the show started, that's more than since the day before restrictions were put in place on March 15th. Seems pretty reckless if you ask me, but apparently people don't see it that way.
Well, I know that a lot of health officials are completely frustrated. I've read a number of news stories and headlines today across the country, including in states where they're kind of like, la, 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 no such thing as COVID, la, 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 not listening. Even health officials in those states are just going, holy ass crackers. Are you kidding me? Why did so many people get on airplanes? Because there's this universal, what I've read is that, and we've seen this in Washington, the numbers were starting to flatten out, and everyone's like, okay, maybe people are listening. It's like, no, they're not listening.
They're not listening at all. I actually had a friend of mine today sending me pictures from his trip to Florida to see his family. I'm like, why would you risk your health to get on a plane to go to Florida of all places? I understand the desire to see your family, especially when you don't get to see them very often. But, we're in the middle of this global pandemic thing that is killing record numbers of people. And it's like only growing by the day. And we don't have like anywhere near the control we need to have over it to like get this quashed. But sure, get on a plane, fly to Florida, send me pictures of the sunset. Fantastic.
Como had a piece that caught my eye this afternoon. The headline on that is roughly why travel restrictions won't work in the United States, which it caught my eye because I was thinking, well, this will be a scientifically researched piece. And maybe we've talked to Dr. Fauci or Dr. Bricks or people in the CDC or the IHME or the University of Washington. And when I looked at the byline, it said Sinclair. So actually what it was a piece of editorial masquerading as news. Sinclair Communication was called out years ago on basically declaring to their stations, hundreds of stations across the country, thou shalt run these editorial pieces masquerading as news that support the president.
Yes, I remember this. And so now, well, I mean, what is the end game of this? Support the
well, basically, the end game of this is that travel restrictions work in other countries because those countries manage COVID better, so they didn't get community transmission. But because we have community transmission in the United States, we should just say, fuck it.
And travel. Let's go.
This is
Book a ticket.
This is
God.
We should just say fuck it and just let people travel because we have such widespread community transmission that it doesn't matter. And it's the old argument, Jennifer. It's doing more damage to the economy to put the travel restrictions in place.
Go capitalism. You know how I love capitalism. Yeah, so I mean, who cares if a few people die? Collateral damage for the good of capitalism. Yeah, that's just insane to me. And it's also, you know, equally insane to me the number of people that are likely to be influenced by that piece, who are influenced by this kind of propagandist media that continues to kind of push back against the need for restrictions in any capacity in the context of COVID. But we continue to see it day after day. And that's why we don't have a handle on this.
And this also ties into Donald Trump, President of the United States, not for much longer, but President of the United States. He said there would be 20 million people vaccinated by the end of December. Tomorrow morning is December 29th, and we're at about 2 million people. Yeah. We're only off by 90%.
Oh, I mean, numbers, it's not that big a deal, I guess.
He's not good with the numbers. If there's one thing I've learned in the last several years, he's not good with numbers.
It's really weird since he touts himself as being such a successful businessman. You'd think he would have a better handle on numbers, but whatever.
He just got the decimal point in the wrong place. 2 million, 20 million. Just move that decimal point. He does that with his money.
Move it to the left one. You'll be fine. God.
And then this ties into another and our fourth kind of story here. Although I did kind of weave in a fifth one in there about the vaccinations. It's going to snow like a mother up in the mountains, not in the lowlands. National audience, what are you talking about? Yeah. National audience just for 90 seconds, okay? But it is going to snow like a mother in the mountains come the weekend for New Year's Eve. They're saying 4 to 5 feet of snow and a little bit. I generally don't like going out on snow forecasts more than 3 days because it's so variable here. But I did look at the computer models a little bit. And it looks like it's going to snow like a mofo up in the passes in particular, not down here in the lowlands. We're just going to get rain.
Yeah, that is a ton of snow. So if you're thinking about traveling across the mountains, probably shouldn't do it.
Unless, of course, you don't like the government telling you what to do and it's tyranny. And then I would recommend driving a rear-wheel drive convertible up there in shorts and a T-shirt.
And no mask.
And leave your cell phone at home because they can track you and it might have 5G signals. Yes, please don't do any of that.
You should be microchipped. There's all of these things you should not do if you plan on driving across the mountains.
And I know we're making jokes, flippant jokes about 5G, and then we're going to be actually condemning ourselves later on in the show about making flippant jokes about 5G because it's no joke anymore. That's a whole separate story.
Yes.
And with that, I think we're going to go ahead and roll our first story.
Okay.
my goodness. It's just been like Thursday, right? We had the Thursday show, Christmas Eve show. We played like this last 6 days. And I'm just going to roll the clips.
Okay.
Overnight, President Trump ending with a pen what he began with this video message last week.
It really is a disgrace.
This will also avert a government shutdown at midnight tonight. The president announced the signing in a statement. The bill includes a $1.4 trillion to fund government agencies through September.
The president confirmed his move last night in a statement that criticized China and the Democrats, and he repeated his claim that the bill is full of waste and does not give people enough direct help.
Yeah, Craig, the House just voted to more than triple these direct payments from $600 to $2,000. The vote fell largely along party lines, with Democrats in favor of the boosted payments and Republicans opposed, despite the president's demands.
There's so much to unpack here. And there's a lot actually to explain because there's a lot of confusion. And I've read, particularly with people who are on unemployment, there is massive amounts of confusion. And we're going to try to unpack some of that. And I actually did some reach out to the state. The state is like overwhelmed. I didn't take it personal. Like, who the hell's Malcontent News? I didn't take it that way. And I will say also the information on the state website is just, it's not good. And, you know, it's written like politicians write it or government drones wrote it. So, you know, Trump went to Mar-a-Lago to play golf and ruin Christmas for 40 to 50 million Americans who literally were wondering how they're going to eat next week when we go back to Christmas Eve. Mike Pence went to Vail on a ski trip. And there's like all these rumors and questions like, is Pence going to like bail from the United States after January 6th? That'll be interesting to see. Whole separate story. Saturday comes and goes. He doesn't sign. There is just, the economists are like, holy crap. Landlords are holy crap. People that are renting are holy crap. People on unemployment are holy crap. And then Sunday, he signs it after slagging this out and saying, no, 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 no. Like, what the hell is going on up here?
Yeah, no, I was actually really kind of surprised he signed it because I thought he was going to dig in a little bit harder. And I don't know, whatever, maybe he had a temporary Grinch moment long enough to slide his hand across the paper. I don't know, like his heart grew a size and he wrote his signature and then everything went back to normal. But it is super confusing. And I've been on some of the unemployment hardship, like, you know, group websites or group sites on Facebook today. And there's a lot of confusion, even like that kind of final payment that was supposed to through the week of December 26th has been pending or late for people. People are very confused about, you know, the status of their claims, if they need to reapply for benefits, what's going on with the Inslee money. There's a whole lot of confusion in the context of unemployment. And like you, I went onto the unemployment website to kind of play around and see what information was out there. And it's very, it's not thorough. It's not really comprehensible. It doesn't necessarily answer the questions that are really, you know, really plaguing people at the moment. And so what's going to happen is that's going to inundate call centers with people who are confused by this lack of information.
Right. And I agree. So let's try to unpack some of that together here, Jennifer. So if you're on unemployment, regular plain old unemployment, and your unemployment isn't like in adjudication or investigation, or you're just getting your unemployment money on the weekly, you're getting paid. Check.
Yeah.
If you're on PEUC, and same thing, you're not in adjudication, you're not in investigation, you're getting paid. Check. If you are on extended regular unemployment and your money hasn't run out on the extension, you're getting paid. Check. It's the same thing, as long as you're not in adjudication or all that other stuff. If you are on pandemic unemployment assistance, and you were all set, everything was going, and you have your current where you're going for this week, but that's for last week because it's in arrears. So 12/26 was the end date. So you
Yep.
are still getting paid this week. Not the, we're going to get to the 550 here in a minute.
Yep.
Not the 550. You're going to get whatever you would normally get because it went through 12/26. The cutoff was 12/26. This is the donut. This is the week where everyone has fallen off the cliff. Have I got it right so far?
I think so. My only contention here is like what I've seen on the multiple Washington unemployment websites that I've gone to is that a lot of people that assumed that they were being paid this week, you know, the whole arrears through 12/26, haven't seen any movement on their claims and they're starting to panic.
And I think part of what people need to realize is you had a bank holiday on Friday, and I think that is why they're not seeing the movement. And the state did say all the way back before Thanksgiving that through Thanksgiving to the end of the year, you shouldn't be expecting necessarily get your payments on the regular day that you get the payments because we have all these holidays coming through during this time.
Yeah. And then you combine that with, you know, this whole potential lapse in payments and him waiting and prolonging the signing process. And I'm sure it's a mess at unemployment right now, but that kind of lack of information, that's really necessary to kind of, I guess, calm people's concerns. Just isn't out there, and it's, you know, not accessible through call centers because they're so bogged down and overloaded. So I think it's just creating more panic than necessary.
And so one of the things that's been in the news is the actions that Washington State has taken, because Washington State, I can't say it's the only state, but I did see in a number of news stories and also just trying to find out like what the heck's going on here. Washington State came up in a lot of national and even local stories going, hey, Washington State is doing this. So for about 95,000 people on PUA, who, again, you're not in adjudication, your money hasn't run out, blah, 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 blah. They're going to get a one-time check for $550. That check will actually, I believe, the check, when I say check, it's metaphorical, a little debit card or direct deposit. That money, as I understand, will also hit your account this week. And that is to fill the hole that is coming next week, because you can't file for next week, which is this week. And this is where it gets all confusing, because Donald Trump had a temper tantrum and didn't sign the document on Saturday and instead signed it on Sunday.
Yeah, no, exactly. And the problem is, too, with the whole adjudication issue is that, you know, back in, what was it, May, June, when we had all that identity fraud and the state lost, what was it, millions of dollars for false claims. A lot of people, again, I've been reading through these Facebook group pages, are still in adjudication, have been waiting, even though they've submitted the stuff, to have their stuff cleared. So these are potentially people that could have benefited from that $550, but because, you know, ESD is so backlogged and bogged down and has so much going on, they're still in adjudication and won't be eligible.
Well, and let's have some bipartisan throttling of politicians here. Our head of employment security here in Washington State is a professional bundler who had raised over $2 million for the Democratic Party. And it really smacks of some crony, hey, here, have this job. This is a easy job. And it was an easy job right up until COVID. And then it became a nightmare. And the person that heads up, her name is escaping me, is like absolutely unqualified for the job and was unqualified to have the job in the first place. I'm not saying that because employment security is just a dumpster fire right now in the state of Washington.
Yeah. So it's Susie Levine. That's who it is.
It's who again?
Susan Levine.
Susan Levine. Thank you so much. And Susan Levine, under her watch, employment security lost up to $600 million. And she still has a job.
Yeah.
And we're not talking $600 million at the federal level. I mean, for the state budget, $600 million is a lot of money.
It is a lot of money. And unfortunately, there were a lot of people that were, whose identity was taken, who were actually, you know, needing to receive unemployment benefits, that were, you know, really negatively impacted by all of that, because what they did is they stopped payments for a while until they could determine identity and all this other stuff. And there are a lot of people actually out there still waiting from that time period to have that stuff processed.
And the nightmare is only beginning. Let me throw this one out there for some of the people who had their identity stolen and have not, but they weren't collecting unemployment. They didn't need unemployment. They had their identity stolen because guess what they're going to get in the mail in about another 45 to 60 days?
Overpayment.
They're going to get a W-2.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I didn't even think about that. Not to mention the whole overpayment thing. And yeah.
So the first thing they're going to get is a W-2 for people that didn't look into this. So they're going to go, what do you mean I got $10,000 in unemployment? I was working the whole time.
Yeah.
And then they're going to call up and go, well, what's this W-2? And then, Jennifer, then they're going to get the, hey, you owe us $10,000 message.
Yeah. That's
what a
gonna
mess.
Be a mess. Yes.
Louis Jigs. The other thing that's happened there is, again, there's so much to unpack. Did you read the statement from the White House that came out? Did you read this document that, that Donald Trump put his name on the bottom of?
No, I did not.
A statement comes out from the White House explaining why he signed the document. And it reads in this language that there is just no way that Trump wrote it. It was written by a staffer, and it's explaining and using lots of legal terms and getting into constitutional law and citing the 1974 decision that a president can redline a bill, but right, it's taking out of context, which we'll get into in a minute here. And then there were like 3 sentences tacked on in the end that, if you could imagine visually, it was like they were written in crayon, right? It was kind of like, China evil, I'm going to get you $2,000, bigly amazing, you just wait and see, I love the American people.
I heard snippets about this, and I saw posts about it on social media, but I've not read the document. But I heard that he went back to blaming China for all of the woes again.
Yes. And I know that I've started kind of bagging on low information voters. And honestly, I do wish more low information voters would watch shows like ours and get a little more informed, because what the low information voters are is like, he could do line item veto. But Republicans, you're laying in a bed of your own making, because Bill Clinton got line item veto in 1996. And Bill Clinton started using the line item video. And in Clinton versus New York, Supreme Court case 1998, line item veto was determined, pushed by the Republican Party, to be unconstitutional.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Wah, wah, wah.
Wah, wah. I know. I'm a pretty compassionate person, but the degree of sympathy I have for Mike Pence and the Republican Party right now is about like that.
Yes. And what people don't understand that are like, he's redlined this document, right? What people don't understand is he can redline it all he wants. The House and Senate's already voted on it. So it's symbolic. But his followers aren't going to latch on to the symbolism. What they're latching on to is he's done line item veto, and the House and Senate isn't going to honor it. Hence, we must burn the House and Senate down in flames and fury because they're not supporting dear leader. And it's like, no, he can't. He was supposed to redline it before that's what he could do. And the whole reason that was passed in 1974 was to reduce presidential power of a Republican, Richard Nixon, because what happened is on programs that Nixon didn't like, because Nixon was paranoid and vindictive, although Donald Trump has taken it to a whole new level, that Richard Nixon must be smiling from heaven or hell, wherever he may be right now, and go, I'm so happy this asshole got elected. I'm no longer the crook. Oh. My little dog Checkers, too.
Okay.
So this was passed because what Nixon was doing was he would sign it. Fine, you're going to make me sign it. There, I signed it. But then he wouldn't release the money. So this is why they created this red line for the bill to come before, because this was like a check and balance. Because basically what the House and the Senate want was, if you don't release the money by X number of days, then we could just take the money and we're just gonna do it, right? You can only sit on it for so long. But to give the balance side back to the president, we could send the bill to you and you can go, I don't want this, I don't want that, I don't want this, and it forces the conversation. But as we know, including within Trump's camp, Trump was completely detached from all negotiations on the omnibus bill and the COVID stimulus bill.
Yep. He was pouting, hiding in his bunker, whatever he was doing, golfing, I don't know. But totally like abdicating his duties as president of the United States because he was in the throes of a temper tantrum. So yeah.
The other thing that's happened is the House has voted to add $1,400. There's all sorts of confusion on that too. It's like, oh, the House added $2,000. No, they didn't vote on $2,000. They added on $1,400 because Trump wanted $2,000. He didn't want $2,600. And that vote was almost down party lines. Democrats voted for it. Republicans voted against it. And by all reports, this is dead on arrival when it goes to the Senate. It is not advancing.
Yeah, absolutely. And Bernie Sanders came out with a statement in an interview talking about he was going to, basically force the Republicans to vote on it. But I mean, you can force them to vote on it. It's, an interesting political show, political theater, but it's not going to change anything.
But Donald Trump, in doing all of this political theater, has essentially thrown Mitch McConnell and the Senate Republicans completely under the bus.
Yes, he has. And I've heard reports that he is quite unhappy with McConnell and company right now. Because
there's no win. Because the Republican Party, I've noticed something in the last week, the Republican Party is all of a sudden starting to care about the deficit again, as we predicted right after the election. And I've noticed that. And one of the things that I've brought up is, well, Donald Trump has increased the deficit by over $7 trillion. And the immediate comeback is, oh, yeah, well, Obama increased it by $8.6 trillion. And it's like, well, you're conveniently leaving out that Obama was president for 8 years, not 3 3/4, or now we're up to 3 9/10 at this point. So you're leaving that little tidbit out. You're also leaving out the fact that when Obama became president of the United States, he took the Bush economic recovery plan and the architects of the Bush economic recovery plan in a show of bipartisanship and just ran with their plan. He really didn't change anything up. That included trillions of dollars in bailouts and quantitative easing to major corporations and not the American people.
Yes. Yeah, it never ceases to amaze me the amount of times when you counter or try to bring up anything Trump has done, how it's still countered with Obama, like he's president, or Hillary and her emails. But the deficit thing, I've noticed that has become quite prominent on the Republican conversation again lately. You were definitely spot on about that. And I think we're going to hear a lot more about that over the next 4 years.
I was watching a little bit of Freight Broker today, and it was interesting to watch because I will say this. He's not happy with Trump. He flat out articulated, I don't know who in particular it was. I say Freight Broker because I know they have multiple people on there.
Yeah.
Whoever was speaking this morning, not happy with Trump, was taking shit in the comments on you're not a supporter and true believer and blah, blah, blah. I actually fired a couple of comments on it. He read my comment on air. And because one of the things he said, one of the things that he said was, I don't know what his plan is. What's his plan? And my thing was, he doesn't have a plan. Dude, come on. And that's all I wrote. And he literally read that on air. And I was like, oh my God, I just trolled Freight Broker. And he's agreeing with the malcontent. I hope Freight Broker is going to see this clip now and just be like, damn it. No, not really, because I've said many times, and you and I, Jennifer, we've talked about this.
Yeah,
I think people agree on the symptoms. That and I think people kind of can identify the disease. It all falls apart on how we go to cure it.
Yes, absolutely.
But he has no plan. And the last thing I want to talk about before we jump to commercial and then our next story, because I think it just bears clarification of people's minds. The other thing, there was this tweet, this terrifying tweet from Rasmussen today with the Stalin quote, although people don't know if Stalin basically said this or not. But the quote is roughly, voters don't get to decide, the people don't get to decide, the people in charge get to decide. And then Rasmussen goes on to explain how Mike Pence on January 6th can go, well, I refuse to count the electors from these 6 disputed states. But that's actually not true. And that's not how the Constitution works or is written at all.
No, it's not. And it was entertaining to me when I saw that they had served Mike Pence with papers today. Some of the Republican Party was trying to put him in front of a Trump-appointed judge in Texas to
Gomer.
Basically force his hand to appoint Trump-favorable electors and try and overturn it.
And Gomer is a special kind of stupid. I mean, he really is a special kind of stupid.
That's alarming.
From Texas, the bastion of police reform.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting next couple of weeks.
It is going to be an interesting next couple of weeks, and I continue with my grave concerns, particularly on the 6th, where the president is practically inviting the brown shirts to come and tear Washington, D.C. apart on the 6th. I mean, it's like he's looking for his Kristallnacht or his Reichstag fire.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
So we will see what happens with that. And with that, Jennifer, I'm going to go ahead and roll a commercial.
Okay.
To the side. Music has a power greater than words can really express. Songbird, sing a song to me. Let me know where I'm supposed to be. It's such a shame, well, I was your TV girl. The EP is called Blue, and my website is classicelishamusic.com.
All right, so I was looking at a couple of your comments while Classic Elijah ad was running on there. Questions on the Stalin quote. Yes, I totally agree with that. Shell, you're asking about anything about how service members and others be paying double payroll tax starting in January because of the 2020 deferment. Yeah, surprise. That's another one we forgot to talk about, isn't it? There's going to be a lot of very upset people here who are going to get a pay cut going starting the first week of January. What the hell happened?
Man, I don't know. It's I just feel like everybody's very excited that 2020 is almost done, and I feel like 2020 is going to have like an encore, at least for the first few weeks of the year, and it's going to be an absolute mess. I hope I'm wrong, but it's not looking that way.
No, it isn't. 2021 is reaching its drinking age, and it is going to go on a drunk rampage, I think.
Yes, it is.
But we'll be here to report it. And with that, I'm going to go to our next story. Our next story takes us to Seattle, and it takes us to last night. We are going to be doing a behind the poll tonight. Generally, the march down to SPOG, the Seattle's Police Officers Guild, was basically totally uneventful. I actually really struggled to put together an interesting behind the poll. The other thing is that Spog played a lot of music, which creates copyright issues for us. And we're going to talk about that when we get to behind the poll. That's the last segment on the show tonight. I stopped shooting. Renee continued over with the group, and Chris Rojas, who has worked with us and is part of Converge, also walked over with the group. The challenge I have when protesters are de-blocking, that is, they're getting back into their street clothes. If we're streaming that, then we're essentially doxing people. And so generally when the protest comes to an end, we end scene. And the other thing is just the bike officers that were largely following them stayed on the sidewalk immediately to my left. We have that on behind the pole. And there was this incident. I'm going to go ahead and roll this camera. This is from Chris Rojas on this. I will say, this may be, this is like the trigger warning. There may be some things that are a little hard to see and take, and there is some really racist language in here. So with that warning, I'm going to roll the clip.
I've been a bystander on the sidewalk. This individual attempted to run people over with his vehicle.
We'll figure it out.
I'm willing to give eyewitness testimony to that.
We'll figure it out.
Fuck you, nigga! Where the fuck are you gonna go, asshole?
What's your motherfucking ass? Get the fuck out! Get the fuck out! Get the fuck.
So anyway, that's how things ended. And Renee Rackety, who is our field producer, also had video that we tweeted out and put on our Facebook yesterday. So if you want to see that, you can go to our Twitter at Malcontentment T, and you can see that video clip that's over there. Jennifer, the thing that sticks out to me here is the Chud. Again, there's a lot to unpack. The Chud argument. I got to hit the Chud button.
These are Chud. Cannibalistic humanoid underground dwellers.
The Chud argument is, right, and it's the circular logic. Well, you want to defund the police, so why should the police take any action? But if the police don't take any action, it just feeds the justification to defund the police. Yeah. So, right, there was a crime was committed there in front of like 20 heavily armed police officers, and they just let it happen. And the guy was stopped, right? All it would have taken, like any one officer could have just said, dude, put it in park.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. There was nothing done to try and reprimand people that literally tried to run down protesters again.
And the other thing that sticks out to me, it was a peaceful march. They were done. I think that's something that people have to really understand here, right? This was targeted. This was planned. And because it was all over.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, absolutely. And what gets me is, you have all these right-wing groups and organizations who are, lamenting COVID restrictions because of, the First Amendment clause about the right to peaceably assemble. But that apparently only applies to their right to peaceably assemble, because when other people do it, it's somehow offensive to them, and they feel the need to intervene in very violent ways.
And as we witnessed in Salem, Oregon last week, peacefully assembling includes pepper spraying police. There's an open investigation on whether tear gas was used against the police, not the other way around, but that they deployed, these patriots deployed tear gas on police officers, breaking windows, destroying security cameras, tearing down fences, and threatening police officers with bodily harm. And the other thing that we saw was when they were ploinked by inert pepper balls filled with baby powder, they kind of lost their shit.
I know. It's very tragic when, you actually get some kind of repercussion for your action. But don't forget, they made it wholesome, though, because they brought their children and dogs.
Yes, exactly. Of which they also condemn when people bring children and dogs. What was that? I'm sorry?
I said you got to rep that 1950s nuclear family thing. So it's just, and it seems to me like, I think I felt a little bit like I talked to you last week a little about like that felt like a little bit of a test about, what kind of action police might take against them should they engage in more nefarious behavior as it gets close to inauguration time. But it's very interesting to me how little action was taken against them for what they did versus other protests that we've seen in the past where there's been this excessive use of force for far less.
And you and I have talked about this. We've talked about this on the show. Enough. The wrong person sees enough of this, and something truly terrible is going to happen.
Yep, exactly. And I think we saw hints of that in Nashville over Christmas.
Yes, and we're going to talk about Nashville a little later in the show. I mean, there you go. There's the red truck incident. It's just toe curling. And the thing, it happened so fast. From, peaceful march, I'm walking back to my vehicle and then my phone starts blowing up, from people going, texting me and messaging me, that a truck just drove through protesters.
Yeah. And I mean, what was the ending there? What would they have done if they'd actually killed some people? I'm just like, trying to rationalize what would have happened there. Would the cops have intervened at that point, I guess? Did they think there weren't going to be repercussions for that? Or was this, simply an intimidation tactic?
Right. Well, and it's not an effective intimidation tactic. And, I say, someone feeds enough of this, something terrible is going to happen. That does go both ways, right? Yeah. Somebody pushes too far the other way, something terrible could happen in the other direction because someone's going to say, enough, I've had enough. Yeah. And they're going to take things into their own hands.
Exactly.
And neither of those are good outcomes.
No, not at all. I don't know what it's going to take to temper this. I don't know what kind of change it's going to take, but I feel like there's going to be so much resistance from those particular people, right-wing, especially white men, who are so resistant to any kind of change that they feel might put them at any kind of potential disadvantage, that this is going to continue to escalate for some time.
Completely agree. And with that, we're going to roll over into our next story after we do a little pause for the cause, as they used to say back in the day. Hi, Malcontents. I'm David, the Malcontent, and I'd like to talk to you for a moment about supporting independent media. When you support us, you help us bring the before, during, and after. You help us defend the First Amendment. You help us amplify BIPOC and LGBTQIA voices, and you help us hold leaderships at a local, state, and federal level accountable. None of this would be possible without support by viewers just like you. When you become a patron for as little as $5 a month, you help buy technology, safety equipment, and help cover travel expenses so that we can continue to bring you news that you trust. If you can't become a patron, you can do a one-time donation on Venmo, and your dollars will go to the exact same causes. With your continued support, we can continue to amplify BIPOC and LGBTQIA voices while showing the truth on what is happening in the world around us. Once again, thank you. And we're running out of time. You're running out of time on the, I don't want to call it a special. I don't want to call it an incentive. I'm reluctant to call it a contest, but you are running out of time to sign up and become a patron. This is what we're doing. The Ally League sold out of black boxes over the holiday season. However, there's one black box left, and it has the Malcontent's name on it. And we're going to give that black box away at $75 to one lucky patron subscriber, regardless of the level that they are subscribing at. And the way that we're doing that is we have subscriptions through Patreon that are from $5 to $50 a month. And $5, even just $5 a month, helps defray our growing costs because we are expanding and growing as an organization. And so through your support, we can continue with that mission and continue to grow. So the way that things will work is a week from today. However, your last chance to sign up is Thursday. Coming up Thursday at midnight is when the cutoff is. So the way that it'll work is for every $5 you pledge, you essentially have a ticket that will go into a drawing. We're going to draw live on air here on Monday. And so if you do $10 a month, you'll have 2 tickets in the bucket. If you do $20 a month, you have 4 tickets in the bucket. Real simple. We're going to do on-air drawing on the 4th, and somebody is going to win that black box. And so if you can't do that, I mean, we were talking about, times. What is it? Money's short, times are hard. Here's your fucking Christmas card. I remember this, right? Believe me, I totally get it. You have no flipping idea how well I flip and get it, okay? With all of that said, you can just do a Venmo if you want. Even if you just Venmo like $3 in the tip jar, it all adds up. We account for all of the money with the editorial board, and we have basically been funded by the Malcontent through just about all of 2020. And we need to shift some of that off the Malcontent's plate. So I just don't know how else to put it. So please support us, and we can continue to bring you this great journalism and get things like a new camera for Jennifer, who looks not as blurry tonight.
Yay.
And with that, we're going to roll our next story. Jennifer's bringing this story to us about saving Indigenous speakers from COVID. And this is an area of study that she is involved in and brings a lot of knowledge to the table on this. Jennifer, we did not start the show with a land acknowledgement. Yes. So I know we're mid-show, but if you would like to do a land acknowledgement now, and then you can go into your, I think it's a nice chance to get it in there as we're talking about Indigenous issues.
That was kind of my plan because I forgot about it too. My bad. But, I just would like to take a moment to acknowledge that we are on, I'll acknowledge the Coast Salish peoples of this land which touches the shared waters of all tribes and bands within the Suquamish, Tulalip, and Muckleshoot nations. We acknowledge the people past, present, and future of the Duwamish tribe, the Muckleshoot tribe, and other tribes on whose traditional lands we work and live. And again, I think that's extremely important for people to get in the practice of doing. And for our national viewers, people outside of the Seattle area, I urge you to kind of, maybe get invested and look into the origins of your own land and the people that lived there.
Thank you so much for doing that. And do you want to jump into the story? Or do you want me to do your clips?
So just to kind of want to preface this story a little bit, COVID has been particularly hard hitting on people within Native nations, specifically federally recognized Native nations. And I clarify federally recognized just because they're not federally recognized. Why is that so hard to say tonight? Doesn't mean Native. They're not actually Native nations. For example, the Duwamish. But the studies that have been done on reservations belonging to federally recognized nations have demonstrated that COVID has hit at twice the rate of the general public. And so kind of really thinking about this and then what that means in the context of language preservation and the longer history of that. So if you want to roll the clip, then I'll talk about it a little more.
And we'll roll that clip for you.
Thank you.
More than 5 weeks ago, the $2 trillion coronavirus relief package was signed into law by the president. Set aside their $8 billion appropriated in aid for Native American tribal communities to battle the virus. $0 of the $8 billion had actually been released and dispersed to help those communities.
This region did have one of, if not the highest per capita COVID infection rates, as well as death rates in the country. Because of the remoteness, it can be hard for people to access care.
Our facility staffs were the first one to open the box, and they were absolutely shocked. They turned completely white.
They expected a box of PPEs or COVID testing supplies.
So it was quite a shock to everybody to instead to receive body bags.
The idea of disease coming into your communities and wiping them out is very, very real in your institutional memory.
Yeah, absolutely. We have that historical memory of that happening, wiping out. I mean, it diminished our whole tribes.
When they were shopping here, some of our elders, some of the store clerks would say, "Go home, you dirty Navajo. Don't bring your disease here."
To be able to be on the list, to be the first to receive something, it to me, it just kind of shows that the tribe is putting our elders and our speakers in the proper place.
The Cherokee Nation is one of several tribes placing a high priority on its elders and native language speakers.
When all of us first language speakers are gone, it's going to be gone. Nobody's going to be able to speak like we do.
Thank you for that, Jennifer.
Yeah, so just to clarify a little bit, the funds in question, the coronavirus funds that we talked about back in April have since been released. There was some kind of contestation over how they would be allocated and to which Native peoples, and there was some issues with, because tribes in Alaska are actually their own kind of corporations, and that's the way they're set up because Alaska was settled so late and there's not treaties, and it's very different in that context. But that money has since been released to Native nations. But the issue we've noticed recently, and I've read some reports that the Cherokee Nation and of course many of the Sioux, Lakota, Dakota peoples were doing extra to ensure that their native language speakers were being protected from COVID, including early vaccinations, because of the significance, long-term significance of having native speakers and how many were lost due to things like boarding school and assimilation policies throughout the 19th century and into the 20th century, not to mention, the ways in which disease in the past has basically decimated Native peoples. They estimated at the time Europeans settled North America and, disease went wild, smallpox and other diseases, YARS and even the measles, that around 90% of Native population was lost. So this has been ongoing, and, Native peoples aren't, this isn't new for them, this experience of loss due to introduced disease. And so they're especially protective of their culture because of so much cultural loss as a result of ongoing U.S. assimilation policies and efforts to physically and culturally exterminate them. And so the fact that these Native nations like the Cherokee and Lakota, and I've read some reports of local Native nations like the Yakima doing similar things to preserve language, is extremely important and just kind of, I guess, lends itself to this longer, very contentious history of assimilation and loss that Native peoples have experienced and of what they're kind of doing to overcome that.
Yeah. It's, I know, I'm like a little bit at a loss for words over this because It's complicated. There's we say on the show all the time, there's a lot to unpack. There's a lot to unpack. It's very complicated. I know that when I spent some time at Pine Ridge Indian Reservation, they have a radio station. I have no reason to believe that it's not there anymore. It's all in Lakota. And there are less than 5,000 native speakers of Lakota in South Dakota left alive. But that is part of their efforts to keep the language alive, is to have the radio station. And the radio station is all Lakota. It's all in Lakota. I also know, I don't know what tribe Sacred Spirits was. This was a series of albums that was done in the 90s. And it is all of these Native American chants that were kind of done with some techno music on the background of it. And the whole idea is that if they would provide this is a medium for people to listen to these chants and go, here is the language, and then here is the translation of it, then our language will carry on in the music. And I know that there was a series of albums that was done with that, but we're once again, we touched on this last week with your story, but we're once again in this place of like, genocide's like a tough word at this point, but it's like institutional negligence that is perpetuating, trying to finish off the genocide that started a few hundred years ago.
Oh no, honey, this is settler colonialism. This is like colonialism 2.0, but it just never goes away. That's how we define this kind of ongoing effort to assimilate, dispossess, acts of genocide directed at Native peoples in the United States, Canada, Australia, what we call settler colonial nation states. Because, traditional colonialism, of course, was, you sent out people in service of the metropole, they gathered resources, they extracted, they basically raped the landscape, enslaved people, and then brought all of that back to the metropole. But with settler colonialism, you have this ongoing colonialism that doesn't end, and it sets up institutions to keep itself in power, and it's very interested in land and resources. And in order to realize and bring that to fruition, it needs to, quote unquote, deal with its Indian problem. And that usually occurs through these acts of physical and cultural, genocide. So that's kind of how we frame it. But what's particularly interesting to me, and I was thinking about this in the context of settler colonialism earlier, is the Seattle Indian Health Board getting all of those body bags back in May when they asked for personal protective equipment. I mean, that's if that doesn't give you an indication of the long-term relationship between Native peoples and the federal government, and this, questions of genocide and, removal and dispossession and all of these other things, I don't know what does.
One of the things that jumped out at me when we were researching to pull clips for you for this story, it was really hard to find clips. There's very little coverage on what is going on. There was a fair amount of coverage for the Navajo Nation in particular, but only because things are so bad there. I mean, we have Doctors Without Borders operating in the United States. They're operating on the Navajo reservation. They are operating in Florida, and they're operating in Louisiana. And look, if you're one of these America, USA, types, you should be fucking humiliated that Doctors Without Borders is operating in our country, because we spend the most on healthcare out of any country in the world, and that is how bad we've dropped the ball.
Yeah, no, and it's interesting too, is that the Navajo Nation, and not that they're not deserved of this attention, has always been kind of the poster child for the relationship between Native peoples and the U.S. If you look back to the poverty special that was done on them in the 60s, when they were trying to advance all of the poverty bills, you look at all of these things there because they're the largest. If you go back to the New Deal, when John Collier was trying to get people to accept, the Native nations to accept the New Deal, he went to the Navajo Nation first because they were the largest and he thought most influential, and it would gain him the most traction in Congress. But he went there and implemented this really terribly harmful stock reduction program that basically just rejected any traditional knowledge and did a whole lot more harm than good, and caused the rejection of the New Deal the what they called Indian New Deal, the Indian Reorganization Act, by the Navajo Nation, which in turn was, basically its, downward spiral after that. So it's not uncommon for the Navajo Nation to receive that kind of attention. And I think it does, it's good insight into what's going on in Native nations, but it doesn't tell the entire story. So I'm really glad that we're able to talk about, what Lakotas and the Cherokee Nation are doing to preserve, and how bad it is across Native nations throughout the United States, and not just within the Navajo Nation.
And to your point about colonialism and this ongoing war, let's go back to South Dakota. And I'm careful to go back because I have that personal connection. But you had the state government there, and Christy Noem, the governor of South Dakota, who is practically a COVID denier, was fighting against tribal authorities to open up the highways through their reservations. And she even went to the federal government going, make them open up. And the federal government was like, what part of sovereign nation and treaty do you not understand?
Which is weird to me, because that's like, the federal government doesn't normally do that. Totally expected that to go the other way. And I think that just shows the disregard that a lot of white people, through these ongoing processes of settler colonialism, white people in power in particular, have for what Native sovereignty actually means. And I think they're just willing to kind of, because the U.S. has been so flippant and frivolous and just basically disregarding of treaties until its hand is forced in things like through the Supreme Court rulings and whatnot. I think that a lot of people in power and the institution of settler colonialism itself actually lends itself to white people going, we don't need to pay attention to what Native sovereignty means. And they don't understand the significance of it. So I don't know. I'm hoping that, this COVID pandemic that we're all experiencing, that has, been proven to be worse for BIPOC people, and particularly Indigenous people living on reservations. I hope that we can get it under control so they don't experience more, more cultural loss.
Shell just made a comment, it's 2020 and there's people on reservations that don't have running water. 1/3 of the Navajo Nation doesn't have running water, and they live in the middle of the fucking desert.
Yes, they do. Yep, they do. They do. It's, and there's all kinds of, federal predatory lending programs that go on Native reservations. And, so many have made such significant gains through economic developments and other economic initiatives to help kind of, create space to express sovereignty and also to strengthen their own cultural, political, and social autonomy. But there's still so much that has been so much, I guess, a legacy of not great things left over from these ongoing poor relationships with the federal government.
And it continues on to this day. One of the things I always like to, and I think I'll probably be saying this every show, right? We're two white people up here talking about BIPOC, LGBTQIA issues. And I want to amplify a Indigenous voice. Can I go ahead and roll this clip?
Yeah, please do.
If we're only given an opportunity to speak English, therein lies some tremendous challenges for thousands of our relatives going back into the decades and generations, and to know that the United States of America made it a policy for natives to not speak their language. So that's of course a human rights violation. But that's another thing to spend time on. Right now our focus is on bringing the language back so we can be healthy and well and fulfill the prophecy that our ancestors gave to us. It's often said that our language, Indigenous language, in this case Lakota, they're spiritual. The languages are spiritual. And they give us an opportunity, we say the Creator gave us the opportunity to express ourselves with that language. So essentially what happens is our spirit inspires us, our mind creates. So out comes our words that we want to share with each other. And our language, because it's spiritual, there's no profanity in our language. So we're always looking for, to give thanks to the Creator for our health, and in a humble way ask for continued health. Because it could be, as some of us were taught, in a twinkling of an eye, things could change. So we never want to take any of that for granted. So when we express ourselves with our language, it's an opportunity for us to do that in a most reverent way. Because the language is spiritual, there's an instantaneous connection. And it's a good feeling, because nobody should ever feel that they feel alone or that they're alone. So our language helps to make certain that it never occurs. So there's step one, if you will, or there's a simple understanding of what health is. Health is given to us one breath at a time. And with our language, we're able to remind ourselves of that, remind each other of that we are relatives.
Justin Taken Alive, tribal elder of Standing Rock Indian Reservation of South Dakota, and despite all of the efforts of the tribe and officials there, has left us. And with that, his language.
Yeah. I just like to give a shout out. Lakotas do a really great job of putting out consumable media for not just Native peoples, but for non-Native peoples as well. And they actually, I think it was like 2010, they put out this really great documentary called We Are a Horse Nation. And it's all in Lakota with English subtitles, or the majority of it is. But it's fantastic. And I think if you Google it, you can still support it. It was for substance abuse. And it's like $6, and it's the most beautiful film. So if people are interested in that kind of stuff, it would be great to support that cause and, kind of learn a bit, especially their horse culture is really, really fantastic and so significant to them. So I just thought it would be nice to kind of give that shout out.
Yeah, if one of the mods could put that into the comments and on the name of that documentary, and why don't you just one more time so that we know that the mods have caught it.
It's called We Are a Horse Nation, and it's absolutely.
And 2010.
Yeah, I think it was 2010.
It really is a beautiful language when you listen with an open mind. It is a very, very beautiful language. And it's a fascinating language because it seems simplistic when you listen to it with an untrained ear, and actually it is an extremely complex language.
Yeah. I can't remember. I was talking to Jean O'Brien. She's Ojibwe, and she's a professor at the University of Minnesota. And she was like telling me there's 4 different ways to say one word depending on how you're trying to use it in a particular sentence. She's not Lakota, of course, but just talking about Indigenous languages more broadly and how complex they are. So that always comes back to me anytime I hear anybody talking about Indigenous language or talking about learning Indigenous language, like it might somehow be easy. I go back to that moment.
The other thing I want to close with is, we highlighted Jesse Taken Alive and his statement. His wife, Cheryl, also a native speaker, died 3 days after him, also from COVID.
Yeah. So.
And, it just goes on and on. And I had talked about last week on just how utterly corrupt the Bureau of Indian Affairs is. It makes HUD look like it's run by the Boy Scouts, and a lot of people would go, HUD is just irreparably corrupt as an organization. And I've always just just do an hour of reading on the Bureau of Indian Affairs, and your brain will melt if you have any compassion in you at all.
Or just read about tribal governance on Pine Ridge in the 70s that lent itself to the Wounded Knee incident.
Yeah. And again, that is something, when things maybe normalize, we'll bring you on the show, and we could do almost like a special on that. It's a whole thing.
Yeah, that would be amazing. That'd be amazing.
And-
It's a huge thing. We could talk about, like, Native activism throughout the 60s and 70s more broadly, because so much of it ties into the Seattle area.
It's a terrible part of U.S. history, and as we talked about last week, a terrible part of history not taught.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
It's. I know last week there were comments like, well, could you just give here's the 5 seconds of it. U.S. military with tanks and machine guns shooting at Native Americans at Pine Ridge in a full-on military standoff. And President Nixon, paranoid, delusional, was distracted by this thing called Watergate. And so he was totally checked out in all of this.
Yep. It was, a full-on assault. It was, like I said, there's a wonderful documentary series produced by Native people called We Shall Remain. They have an hour-long episode on Wounded Knee. It's really powerful. Russell Means is on there. A lot of the original AIM members that were there, Dennis Banks, took part in that particular episode too. So it's a really interesting episode. So if people are interested, I highly recommend they watch that. It's through PBS. And it's called We Shall Remain.
And with that, I'm going to go ahead and roll our next commercial.
Okay.
Black Coffee is a hub for communities and a hub for meeting people, making friends, and understanding.
What Black Coffee is to me is a place to actually call home, a place where Black youth will feel welcomed, where Black families will come and feel like they're at home.
What we're trying to build is more than just coffee. Community is something that we do naturally. We know who's in the community, we know what the deficits are, and we're trying to fix that. We want to bring people together.
My hope is that the phrase grounded in excellence shows up everywhere and that it becomes a movement.
I'm looking forward to hanging out at Black Coffee with my friends and feeling safe.
Black coffee to me means opportunity for people like me and my other friends and family to come here and do homework safely and hang out and stuff like that.
That is happening. It is happening.
Hey there, Malcontent. If you go to Black Coffee, you really should go to Black Coffee. Get the potato scone. It's the food of the gods. So amazing. I love the potato scone. The other thing I want to say, by the way, the shirt I'm wearing, the Ally Accomplice shirt, yeah, Black Coffee. They sell the shirts there. Also want to say, because I haven't said it yet tonight, if you love our mods, you love our admins, you love our researchers, you love our editors, these are the people that make this show possible, the people you don't see behind Jennifer and I. Please go ahead and spam those hearts right now. If you are on Periscope, Twitter, or Facebook, you can spam those hearts. If you're on Twitch or YouTube, you're like, I can't spam hearts. So maybe you could just type like a little message of support going, I love you mods or something like that, because anybody who has moderated a live show like this knows it is a form of psychological self-abuse to be a moderator for one of these shows. And some of the comments that they have to read that Jennifer and I never have to see.
Thank you.
Because we certainly appreciate it. Thank you so much. And with that, Jennifer, I'm going to go ahead and pull us into story number 4.
Okay.
I know a lot of people are like, you hate the police. You bag on the police all the time. You never show the police doing anything good. When the police operate with bravery and honor, I would love nothing more than to show the police operating in bravery and honor. And tonight we have an opportunity to show police officers operating with bravery and honor, and operating right when you get into, because again, it shouldn't be any surprise at this point to anybody watching this, right? I am not an abolitionist of, we just need to get rid of the police. what happened in Nashville on Christmas Day, to me, is like, here's an example of why we need armed police officers. It's just, we don't need armed police officers showing up at a 1:30 in the morning call about an idling car and end up with someone like Andre Hill shot dead. That is just when you maybe need somebody to come over and go, it's an idling car. Okay. And maybe knock on that guy's doors, meaning not Andre Hill's door, the neighbor's door, and like, dude, it's an idling car. Go back to sleep. And we wouldn't be having conversations like we started the show with Columbus, Ohio. Jennifer, I'm going to roll the clip. What this is body cam video out of Nashville. I know you got a chance to preview it because you can't see live what we're showing when we show the clips. We're still trying to figure that part out. If someone knows how to do that in OBS, by the way, tips@malcontentment.com. I know I would love it because I haven't been able to figure out. We have figured out how it's the audio part. Anyway, I digress on that. Trigger warning. Some of this is tough to watch because there's an explosion, there's police, there's yelling, there's screaming, there are people that are running who are terrified. This is body cam video. We're not showing the whole video because it's like 20 minutes long, but we're showing the most important chunk. What do you think, Jennifer? About 3.5 minutes or so, or something like that. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and roll the clip, and then we're going to unpack what we know about Andrew Q, ironically, Q Warner.
Medical down here went off. Fire medical signal 10. Whew. Oh, good. 423, I got 421 with me. One south there. Command, I need all resources out on this call. Check in with your 10-4 ASAP. 423, I'm 10-4. Command, I want a roll call of all central personnel ASAP, starting with 11.
411, I'm 10-4.
15-4. We don't need us.
425.
On the second and Broadway. Proposed until a roll call is completed.
Dispatch the command. I believe you have everyone except for 425.
425.
Direct.
226. You got my 423 coming, so you already need us. Hey, and second and broad. Second and broad. Command to 425. Are you 10-4?
He's 10-4. You guys okay?
Correct.
No, my guys. Where's your car? How you doing? Okay, go to your car. What's going on?
217, myself and 215 are all done.
I mean, it's a hard video to watch. I mean, this is domestic terrorism. If somebody puts a bomb and blows themselves up, we call those people terrorists. We don't call them misguided. We don't call them mentally ill because they're white and happen to strap a bomb around themselves and blow themselves up. They are a terrorist, and we will call them a terrorist as part of the ethics of our news organization. And let's mince no words. Andrew Q, so ironic, Warner was a terrorist.
Yes, absolutely.
One of the things I would like to point out, never been a police officer. I was an EMT. And one of the things, I've seen some questions like, why didn't the police go running down, right? There's people running and they're yelling at the people to run towards them. Why didn't they go run down and help? In a terrorist attack, and it's very interesting because, right, you see kind of like, there's this very methodical prep. There's the walk, up, and then you hear the breathing go up, right? As soon as they can see down that street, everything changes, right? Because in their minds now, it's like, okay, this was damn what just happened here. In a terrorist attack, what is done a lot of times is there's a secondary bomb that's set up. Eric Rudolph did this. Who was if you're not familiar with Eric Rudolph, he's the person that did the 1996 Olympic bombing, and he bombed 2, 3, or 4 abortion clinics. He would set up secondary explosions for the purpose of killing and maiming the first responders that came in to rescue people. And that is why the police were not progressing down that road.
Yeah, I don't know. This whole the Christmas thing to me is absolutely insane. And did they ever ascertain what the end game was of that? I mean, I know I saw reports come out today where he was like, I'm going to be the most famous person Nashville is ever going to, remember. He said something like that to his father, but I wasn't entirely sure of what was the goal of that particular bombing.
Well, and I think that's the part that they're trying to piece together. One of the things that I will talk, because the editorial board, as you know, we were discussing like within that morning, my view was after learning about the AT&T switching station there, and I want to rip apart some of the Q conspiracies that are floating around because it's so batshit crazy. Yeah. When I learned that there was the AT&T switching facility that was there, it immediately just was like, this is about 5G. This is somebody that has ingested too much misinformation about 5G and cell phones. And this is what they went after. And there's been a couple of news stories to say that is basically the direction that the investigation is going in. What we know about Andrew Warner is 63 years old. He was, by all reports, tech savvy. His father worked for AT&T through. He died in 2012 of cancer. There is some implications that I've read that he blames cellular exposure for the death of his father to cancer. So that all of a sudden kind of become woohoo, big red flag number on a long list of red flags. Yeah. He fits another part of the profile in that a lot of his neighbors are doing the whole, he was really quiet and just kind of kept to himself kind of thing, which we hear this all of the time with these. It's interesting that he's 63. Typically they're white, typically they're male, but typically they're under 40. So the 63 thing is, this whole thing about playing the song Downtown has everybody scratching their head. Like, was this some secret message or something that's in there? And my understanding is through DNA evidence that they have confirmed he blew himself up with his RV.
That's because, I don't know, I can't say anything other than people that do that are just cowards, like don't want to suffer the consequences of their actions, and they're cowards. It was just the most bizarre thing. It was the totally like 2020 thing to wake up to on Christmas. Yep. I mean, like, And I'm hesitant for all the people who are like, we've almost made it. It's almost over. No. Yeah, so I wasn't entirely sure what the backstory was. It makes sense now that people were saying he had been talking about his father, and he wanted to be the most famous person Nashville ever remembered, or something along those lines. But we have to, you were talking about the conspiracy theories that were spawning from this, and some of them were being shared in the chat the other day, and they're just absolutely insane. And the direction people are running with this is just mind-boggling to me. How do you have the time to sit home and come up with this?
It really is. And some of it is disprovable in a 2-second Google search. One of the conspiracy theories that I heard was this: there are Dominion system voting machines that have been hidden inside. Somebody just wrote a novel of a comment. There's just a wall of text that somebody has probably just cut and pasted from somewhere. I can't read that wall of text, but it just jumped out on the screen here. People know what I'm talking about. So that there's a whole bunch of Dominion voting system machines that were in that building. And Cerebus, Cerebus is a terrible, right? They're corporate raiders. And Cerebus used to own that building. And Cerebus owns AT&T, or used to own AT&T. Cerebus used to own AT&T, and Cerebus owns Dominion Voting Systems. And this was an attempt to destroy these voting machines before Donald Trump and his minions and Linwood and who's the other batshit crazy woman, Powell, right? Can get their hands on him. And that's what this was about. So let's tear all of this apart. Cerebus never owned the building. AT&T has always been a publicly traded company. So a private equity firm could have never owned AT&T. Cerebus is not owned by... Cerebus doesn't own Dominion Voting Systems. Dominion Voting Systems is owned by a private equity company called Slate, but they're not owned by Cerebus. You can figure that out in a 5-second. They changed the Google results. There's this thing called the Internet Wayback Machine, and you can go to the Internet Wayback Machine. They changed that to, you just go to the next one and the next one. You just keep going down that rabbit hole. I realize for some people, I'm just wasting my breath here. That building, where all the computer equipment and stuff is, and the switches, because that's basically what it is a big switching station for telecommunications. The building is hardened. None of the equipment inside is damaged or destroyed. The reason that the cell system collapsed, and I want to get into this too, 911 in 3 states and air traffic control in the region, is because power was lost, not because the equipment inside was lost. This building, because it's critical infrastructure, was designed to take an attack like this. So it rolled over to generators, and when the generators ran out of fuel, that's it, the end. The system went down, and why couldn't they just go down there with more fuel? Because there was a bunch of police and FBI and ATF agents going, nobody can go down there. But we got to go, no, you don't understand. Investigation, you can't go down there. And they're still working on reconnecting the main power back into that building. I believe that actually got accomplished today.
That's insane. I mean, the availability of information on the internet is both there's so much good to it, and then there's so much bad, because the misinformation that is just spewed about fact, that people are desperately clinging to, that results in this kind of radicalization, to where people do this kind of stuff. I don't know what the fix is for that. What people, I just don't know, but I just know that people, studies have been done that people are more prone to actually taking in things that are misinformation versus fact. So I don't know what steps can be taken to maybe neutralize that, but this kind of ongoing radicalization through these forums and QAnon and these conspiracy theories, I mean, they're really dangerous, and we see the manifestation of that in the Nashville bombing.
Yes, and then of course the question gets into, who else is out there? And I read a little bit of wisdom on Twitter which I was like, ooh, I didn't think about this. Everybody calls them lone wolves, but they're all talking on the same message board in the internet.
Yeah.
So are they really lone wolves? And here, look, I'll put on my tinfoil hat for a minute, right? Let me go conspiracy theory. I'll put my tinfoil hat on. It's not lost on me that 911 systems were knocked out in 3 states, not total across 3 states, but knocked out in 3 states. Air traffic control was knocked out. Hospital communications were knocked out. Police emergency communications were knocked out. Was this a dry run for something bigger come January?
I know, and you had mentioned something about that on the comments on the weekend, and I didn't even at that point, I was like, I can't even handle that right now. I'm thinking about that because it's not, to me, that doesn't seem like that's not feasible. I've been talking a little bit about these protests as kind of a dry run for something larger to see what people can potentially get away with as we get closer to inauguration. So to me, that doesn't seem tinfoily out of line, full on conspiracy theory.
And when we say that police communications are cut off, just to clarify, that isn't officer to officer radio communication or dispatch. It is the broader communication network that was taken down, say to go to the Tennessee State Police and go, help, we just had a bombing. That was the part of the communication networks that was taken down. And certainly taking out air traffic control creates a big problem if you say wanted to fly in federal assets to monitor and listen to some kind of armed activity that was going on against the government.
Yeah, no, I really hope that we're wrong and we can look back in a month and be like, oh, we were just got caught up and we're being crazy. But I'm not prepared to take that step now because I don't think there's anything that's off the table at this particular moment in time because you're starting to see increased desperation among his supporters as we get closer to inauguration. So how that manifests, I'm not entirely sure, but I just don't think that anything is off the table at this point.
Right. Well, you go into 5 stages of grief, and we've talked about this before, right? You have denial, and then you have anger, and there is still a lot of people that are in denial. They haven't even started to move to anger. The good news is of what I have seen, and we saw this on September 26th with, we're going to have 10,000 Proud Boys come here, and 500 showed up, and it was like 200 of them were reporters from all around the world expecting the Civil War to break out in the United States. And they left 2 hours early and literally went to the mall in Vancouver, Washington. And this was the start of the Civil War. But it's very clear that we are in open sectarian violence in this country, and there is this simmering hatred that is growing. And the 2-party system is starting to fray because we have one party right now that just isn't at any point where we haven't had our do you have no, oh God, I'm killing the quote. You help me out here.
What
no shame, right? Do you have no shame? The really famous quote to McCarthy during the McCarthy era when they were ripping apart this young veteran soldier, and it was Adelaide Smith. Adelaide Smith had this, basically like, wait a minute, is this now the bar? And the country went, no, you know what? This isn't the bar. We've had enough. And that was the end. And we have nobody in the position from the Republican Party that anyone's listening to that's going, okay, here's the bar. No more. You got to stop.
Yeah, it's because they've enabled him the entire time. So even if somebody were to step up, who the hell is going to listen to them when they enabled him for 4 years and just let him walk all over everything? Yeah. I mean, you see even the slight turn by people like Mitch McConnell, he's now viewed as, he's been shunned by Trump. So any kind of turn away from, you call him dear leader, is, met with this kind of rampant hostility and shunning.
So I was told it was Steve that I was listening to on Freight Broker this morning, was Steve who was, lamenting kind of I don't know what Trump's doing at this point. I don't know what the end game is, but he's disappeared. I mean, that was literally a word that Steve used today, right?
Yeah.
That he has disappeared. And he does see, it's so bizarre to me, right? He is not acting as president. He's not doing anything for president. He has not called the governor of Tennessee or the mayor of Nashville. And of course, my joke is, well, he's just still waiting to find out if Andrew Warner voted in the election and who he voted for.
Yes. No, exactly. Did he even tweet about it when it happened? Because I looked a little bit on Christmas Day and I didn't see anything other than American Christmas and then like a bunch of voter fraud stuff.
Nope.
Yeah.
It's like it hasn't even happened. Nope.
It's like, it's not my responsibility anymore,
But I want this job for 4 more years.
Yes, it's mine. I'm going to have, a virtual re-inauguration on January 20th.
Because I like executing more people in my final year as president than all of the states in the United States combined. Yes, including Texas, which I read that. When I read that story, I was like, I didn't believe it. I didn't believe it. I actually wasted a lot of time going down the rabbit hole to validate those numbers.
Yeah. I feel like I don't want to get too far out of line bashing him, but I just I have nothing positive to say about him and the job that he's done with this country for the past 4 years. Nothing. He was unqualified and unfit when he assumed the position. He has proven that throughout. And now that he has lost, he's gone into complete man-child mode and is basically pouting in the corner until he's done and not doing anything.
It'll be very interesting to see what happens on January 20th. And if ultimately, if the Marine Corps contingent there is going to have to metaphorically or literally drag him out of the White House, because he will no longer be commander-in-chief at 1201, and the Marine contingent there will no longer have to listen to him. They will answer to Joe Biden. Now, on the other side of the coin, I don't exactly see Joe Biden making the spectacle of dragging Donald Trump out of the White House physically if it comes to that.
I don't either, and I think it would take something pretty dramatic for that to happen. So, but I don't put it past Donald Trump to not engage in some form of theater to get attention, to, on his way out. They talk about like this, whole kind of like dramatic entrance. I can see him doing like a dramatic exit.
So the one thing we don't know is we don't know about Andrew Warner's politics. Said he was very private about this. He didn't have much of a social media footprint, which ties into that recluse. They're tracking me, 5G, right? It ties all into that QAnon BS. But I think this does point out, left, right, in between, the danger of the radicalization and the misinformation that is being spread in this country, and how many more Andrew Warners. Because one of the other things is, Tennessee Bureau of Investigations, the TBI, was like, this guy was not on our radar. Although apparently he was like a little bit on the FBI's radar, but like way off on the side.
Wow. Yeah. That's alarming, because how many more are out there floating underneath the radar like he was?
Yeah. And with that, on that happy note, let's go on our last story of the night.
Okay.
And our last story of the night is behind the poll. And if you watched the stream last night, you will know that it's a little bit of a struggle to do a behind the poll because really not a whole lot happened. You had about 50 people that marched 1.8 miles down 4th Avenue South. They danced, had a little country music hoedown. We'll get into that a little bit later. Outside of the Spog barn. By the way, Spog calls it a barn. They called it a barn in the tweet. It's like, I could go there, but I'm not. I'll behave. Barn, Spog, I'll behave. They made low-hanging fruit. And in my mind, if the for the protesters, it was a huge success. Now, I know that if Mike Solon was on the comments right now, that would melt my brain if Mike Solon ever came on the comments. But if Mike Solon came on the comments, I'm sure it would be, we won. And I'm like, oh, no, 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 no. You know why the protesters won? Because the city of Seattle wasted so much friggin' money yesterday on nothing. And, you know, the protesters could have not even showed up. They could have just kind of gathered up there at King Street Station and gone home. And there was already W, because we're clutching our pearls. And so with that, I'm going to roll behind the pole. Oh, wait a minute. I'm not going to roll behind the pole. I need to explain what behind the pole is. Especially if you're newer to our streams. So we have this thing called Poll Cam, and I know there were people that had never watched our streams before, because I could see comments on Sunday like, holy shit, how tall is this guy? Like, how is he getting these shots? And so we have the camera, and it's on a pole, and the pole is from 9 feet to 16 feet. And then if I hold it all the way up to here, I could actually get about 20 feet if I were to extend it all the way up. And if people have watched me, they know I did like all 1.8 miles there and back like this. So it's a great workout. That's how we get those shots. However, you see what I don't see. Because I'm still 6 feet from the ground. So what I see, particularly if it's in a march, is the back of a lot of people's heads where everybody's seeing other stuff, which is why I always get frustrated when people are like, he always turns the camera when shit's happening. And it's like, I'm not seeing what the camera's seeing. So it's like, I heard a noise. I turned the camera, then I turned back. It's like, why is this so hard to understand? Anyway, I have a camera up on the top of my head, which makes me look like a scary black block Teletubby. And then we also have another camera that is mounted on the pole, but that camera that's mounted on the pole is basically at my eye level. And so that's what behind the pole is. You get to see this video that you actually didn't see. And with that explanation, we'll go ahead behind the pole. Small contingent of bike officers down here, about 10, and then one other individual. So right now, as far as police presence is concerned, there's about 20 officers. I'm a lot more convinced that SPD is actually watching our stream right now. I still request the polka. I wouldn't consider the playing of Achy Breaky Heart Psychological Torture. Maybe the Grundy County song? Is that it? The Grundy County song, or hey little bit on that inside, because that would be psychological torture.
You're so pretty.
All right, sorry about all the jiggle jiggles. Jennifer, I love that couple holding hands. It's really cute. And I even commented on the stream. So I actually had the camera on the pole was off at that moment, because it's like there's no reason to run it. And I saw this and I was like, you know, it just everything that's going on in the world, right? And And here's this couple is holding hands, marching back. And I actually turned the camera on and commented on the stream. It's like, I'm seeing something right now, which is just really amazing, and you can't see it because of poll cam. And so I really wanted to add that to Behind the Poll. So if you missed part of the stream for our audience, what happened was marchers arrived and like nothing happened, and SPD started playing country music again. They actually started playing the country music when I was away and like trying to find where SPD was, because they had kind of disappeared from all sides. And then I heard the music playing and I'm like, oh, here we go. And I go over there and just know they're playing music. But it was the next thing that happened, which is really interesting for me, because they played an ad for the Seattle Police Officers Guild.
Oh, Lord.
And in the ad, what basically it was, we hope you enjoy the music that is playing. And, and since you are enjoying this music, you could always make a donation to the Seattle Police Officers Guild at this URL. Now, one thing that jumped out at me when they did this is admitting, and it's like on multiple recordings, that this was a live public broadcast of copyrighted music for the pleasure of people, and they are soliciting money for that. There's this organization called ASCAP, and like the head of ASCAP would cut the liver out of his own grandmother if he thought that his grandmother was singing happy birthday and somebody heard it walking past the sidewalk. I mean, they are a god-awful organization to deal with. And I say that as somebody who has been in video production and yada, yada, yada for over a decade. ASCAP is a nightmare. ASCAP would not be pleased after that commercial was played, and then all the other copyrighted material that they played for apparently a public performance for the enjoyment of the people outside.
Yeah. I don't even know what to say about this anymore. Like, I don't know. The best part of the entire thing is definitely the people holding hands, because I am not a mushy person or sentimental by any means, but that got me a little bit.
Did it give you the feels, Jennifer?
A little bit, but I'll shake it off. I'm good. But the fact that they're like soliciting donations and breaking the law at the same time is like pretty classic to me.
It's a little surprising to me, right? Because if I think of someone like Mike, I mean, this is a guy who could just pick up the phone and be on Fox News tomorrow, right? Yeah. He does not come across to me as somebody who isn't media savvy. And they don't come across, like, they make these slick videos, right? I don't know what kind of slick video they're going to be able to make from this, but they make these slick videos. And like, to make just such a colossal blunder. Now, I'm certainly not going to report them to ASCAP or share any of those videos, because I think it's pointless. But I will point out that they have certainly broke ASCAP rules. And of what I know of ASCAP, it's something they would potentially drop the hammer down on them and go, hey, you owe us money.
Oh, there goes their donations then.
I guess there goes their donations. Although I don't know how many donations that they got. The other thing I kind of found amusing is, right, there was tweets from SPOG on that they basically drove away the protesters because of the country music playing. And I'm like, I don't know what you saw, but we were filming for like over an hour of them dancing in the street. And
sorry.
The other thing is, we've been razzed by the Seattle police. We've been razzed by Mike Solon. They say they watch the streams. We generally know that they're watching the streams, and something that wasn't lost on me or anybody who was live on that stream is that some of the comments started going, they should play Achy Breaky Heart. I made the comment of like, oh, for the love of God, please don't play Achy Breaky Heart. And like 60 seconds later, Achy Breaky Heart is playing.
I'm sorry, but playing that song should be punishable by law.
And I will say, and I will say, because I lived in Texas for 8 years, I went from first wave, new wave to country music. I mean, that's like, right? And then I went from country music to grunge.
Oh, that's a leap. I used to work with radio, so everybody always assumed I loved country music, but I actually can't stand it unless it's like old music, like David Allan Coe, Hank Williams, stuff like that, Johnny Cash. I'm all right with that, but the newer stuff I can't do.
Well, and that's it. And yes, and I agree with that. And I consider like the golden age of country music kind of ends when Shania Twain showed up. I think you had this period in the 80s and the early 90s where country music was just, right, it was nationally popular, but it was still country music. And then you had kind of this rockabilly, southern rock blending in. You had artists like Travis Tritt, and Garth Brooks wasn't rockabilly, but they were starting to pull a little bit of pop, but it was still country. And then Shania Twain showed up and wrecked it for everybody.
Man, I feel like a woman and everything went to hell.
Which, for pop music, it's fine, right? It was, but she was like, I'm a country artist, and the people pushing her were going, she's a country artist. She's a country artist. Like, you know, country, and that pushed me over to grunge. But I will say on the subject of Achy Breaky Heart, because I always will defend Billy Ray Cyrus on this, although I know that he unleashed his daughter on our on the planet. He is a prolific songwriter. He has written many songs that are beautiful and have amazing lyrics. In a way, it's a shame that he will probably always be remembered for Achy Breaky Heart, because it negates actually a lot of his contributions to country music as a prolific songwriter. And he hasn't written just country songs. He's written pop songs and rock songs and jazz. And he's actually a really accomplished musician. And of what I've heard, he's just a pretty down-to-earth kind of cool guy.
Yeah, I just, it's really hard to get past Achy Breaky Heart and that mullet. Like, I mean, that's a lot to get over for a person. So, I don't know.
I also found it interesting that they closed with Stars and Stripes Forever, which I guess they're probably focusing more on the Stars and Stripes Forever and not that Joe Biden's about ready to become the 46th president, because I just can't see as a freaking Tucker Carlson guest that Mike Solin's really happy about how the election went.
No, I would guess that he's probably not at all. So, yeah, that's odd. It's just the whole thing was kind of odd. So, I don't know what they were hoping to accomplish.
You know, again, at the end of the day, I think the protesters won because nonviolent, no property damage, no nothing.
And there was love there. There was
what's
love
that?
There. There was love there. People holding hands.
That's right. People holding hands, dancing in the street. You know, the police were saying, hey, stop spray painting the sidewalk. The sidewalk had puddles and soaking wet on it. So I don't know, like, if the spray paint they did, a little bit of spray paint they did actually stuck. In the first place, you had a chud basically try to run people over, and the police did nothing, which looks more sympathetic for the protesters than and the city spent tons of money with SWAT team, Bearcats, 100 officers ready to go for nothing.
Yeah, that's a win. That's a win.
Yeah, that's a win. It wasn't a win for the taxpayers of the city of Seattle.
Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah. But that's on the feed.
All right, this is the part of the show where people get to see the top of my head because I look over at this other screen to try to read some of your comments and questions. Other thing, mods and admins, if people ask comments and questions and they've zipped past us, this is a time you can remind us. And I know it takes about 20 seconds for those words to actually get out to the universe that I just said. So, but anyway, this is the part of the show where everyone gets to see the top of my head. Oh, wait a minute. Trent Reznor, Billy Ray Cyrus, and Lil Nas X collabed in 2019. Should have been an alarm bell for 2020.
Yes.
That's one of the comments.
That's true. That did happen.
Callie C is asking this question. Have you noticed he isn't in the spotlight as much as before since he pulled that stunt on you? What Callie C is referring to is me getting doxxed on Labor Day at Spog March 2. It is something that I have noticed, and look, I'm poking on the Mike Solin button again, and I don't want to poke the button too hard. I certainly I should have sent the guy a Christmas card because he actually did so much for us. And with all that happened, the end result of that was we grew significantly, and we took that growth and we're like, okay, we're like a news publication now. And by the way, you made us a news publication because you called us press. So thank you, Mike. But yes, I did notice that after the I think it was September 10th, after that September 10th interview that he did with Como that was juxtaposed with my interview, it does kind of appear, at least on the outside a little bit, that it was kind of like, dude, you need to back away from the cameras a little bit. Although I do know that he has been appearing on Fox News. Tucker Carlson's a fan. So let's see what else we got here. Yes, don't forget ignoring 911 calls. Callie C brings up another point, right? Because they went on TAC 9, they went on priority call only, and it was all for literally no reason yesterday. None. And here's the other thing. Well, they were all tied up, the 100 officers. Chief Diaz, you pointed out that you pulled people to add 100 officers so that you wouldn't have to go to priority call only when dealing with protests. So why are we playing politics, Chief Diaz? Why are we still doing that? People would like to know. Well, some people would like to know.
Yeah.
Kimberly brings up, who's paying for the ecology blocks. This is a thing, right? Renee, our field producer, took some pictures of the ever-growing fortress at the Spog Barn. And again, they call it the barn. This is not me. But, they're turning it into Fortress Spog Barn. And there's city ecology blocks that are there around a private building that isn't paid for with taxpayer funds. And there's a shortage of ecology blocks in the city of Seattle in the rainy season. And the ecology blocks, the actual job for those is to provide retaining walls on a temporary basis to prevent landslides during the rainy season. That's why they're called ecology blocks.
So why do they need them?
Well, and why are they there? Well, what they've done is they've essentially put the ecology blocks so that you can't push the fence over. So like an ecology block weighs 4,000 pounds. So you have the weight of the ecology block on the foot of the fence so that you can't push the fence down.
So they have like their own bunker?
Their own what?
Their own barn bunker?
Kind of. Yes. But it's not. It is and it isn't. It's just in a couple of places it's 2 ecology blocks high, and in other places it's just 1. So it's kind of like in Portland when the feds set up their fence and they just put those concrete. It's kind of like that idea.
Okay.
Did anyone see the article about a subsection of post-COVID recovery individuals experiencing severe psychosis? I have seen several articles about people. Up to 30% of people suffer apparently from mental illness or mental dysfunction after getting COVID. And I think I might know somebody whose cheese has slipped a little further off the cracker after having COVID. Yeah. Trump, excuse me, something in my throat.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, I can definitely think of at least 1 or 6, something along those lines. Super spreader events and all.
The sacred feds. They're taking a page from the feds in Portland with the sacred fence there. Does anybody? I'm going to put this out there because we're just seeing general questions. Does anybody have any questions for Jennifer? Or, particularly on her story on native language speakers. And again, it'll take about 20 seconds for that question to get to the universe.
I imagine people got to listen to me ramble enough. Kind of went off on a tangent there for minutes.
So Pam is saying that, thought the mayor said they were planning to take the East Precinct bunker blocks down. And that's what I understood too. And they're really like... E and DD, they're like playing soccer. Like, I don't even know why the bunker blocks are there anymore. I'm sure it's because of non-specific threats. that if you did a FOI request on, you would never find out what those non-specific threats were. Shell is talking about reading an article about some children who are having kind of psychotic symptoms post-COVID, and the parents are having to deal with that, and they're getting no support from our amazing medical system and all the money we spend.
That's a big shocker, huh?
What's that again?
So that's a big shocker, huh?
Totally shocked.
Yeah.
It appears that our audience is chatting among themselves, and I love when they chat amongst themselves. But I think we're probably at that point we could do happy trails. And let's talk about New Year's Eve. We haven't figured out the time for New Year's Eve. I'm not sure if we're going to do like an 8 o'clock thing or if we're going to do it a little earlier. There will be alcohol involved. And this is what we're going to do for New Year's Eve. We figure, just through personal experience and from the short time that Jennifer has been here, as much as we have a plan, the plans usually get blown up because of the news cycle. Blown up is probably not the best choice of words.
No.
So what we're going to do is a very, very kind of like formal reading of the headlines. Like, we will acknowledge some of the key stories of the day, or that's happened Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And literally I may yank out the teleprompter and just stare in the con and go, and I'm going to read the news now. So we can just do that. We're then going to highlight 5 stories that we covered in 2020 that we felt were key moments in our coverage, and also key moments either at a national level or at a local level. And so we're going to be revisiting COVID, and some of the predictions that were made here in March, which is where a lot of people initially came into this page in 2020 and discovered us. And I took a lot of heat on that for, fear mongering. It can't be right. And I guess we'll call that the I told you so segment. We're going to be talking about May 30, because I think that's a key events that happened here in Seattle, and a little bit on May 31. We're going to be doing CHOP. And so CHOP is our third story, but really that is going to go from, May 30 kind of tease it up, and then we're going to go all the way through, and we're going to go a little post-CHOP to July 4th and the terrible incident that happened on I-5. I think it's critical. As much as it's a terrible, terrible story, it is a critical part of the story of Seattle. If we think about stories that defined Malcontent news, we can't not talk about the September 7th Spog March and everything that happened on that day. And then we'll see what story number 5 is. Maybe something will reveal itself. If you have a favorite, if you're like on that list that I just rattled off and you're like, dude, how can you not be talking about, send us a message, tips@malcontentment.com, or you can drop one in the comments. I go back through, I read everybody's comments before I go to bed, which is why I really appreciate the mod scraping all that stuff, because there's some comments if I saw, I probably have a hard time sleeping. So with that said, Jennifer, thank you so much for joining us again.
Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure.
And I think Jennifer Vision 2020 is a lot better tonight.
Yeah, well, that's good. That's good. It's nice
I know you can't see it. You'll get to see it later. So Jennifer, because she's remote because of COVID, we have her connected through software, but she can't see, again, the whole feed. We did have it set up last week that she could see the feed, and the virtual camera crashed like 30 seconds into the show. I love software. If this stuff was easy, I would have no career. So I'm glad that it's complicated. Last thing I want to do before we say, I want to put a shout out to Omari. People might know that name. Omari is our latest patron. And Omari became the patron tonight. And so we really appreciate Omari's vote of confidence. and him opening up and supporting us and our mission to amplify BIPOC and LGBTQIA plus voices in the world. So with that, be good, Malcontents. Hold hands as you march back from a protest. Get the feels for a minute and then shake it off and go back to hating 2020 with every fiber of your being. And Jennifer, we're going to have you back for New Year's Eve.
Yep, I'll be back. Can't shake me.
She'll be back.
Yes.
And with that, I'm going to roll our show closer. And good night, everybody.
Night.
Malcontent News is a team of journalists, activists, and researchers with 3 key missions. A commitment to show an unfiltered view of the before, during, and after of key events, live, as it happens. To defend the First Amendment using our rights of a free press. And to amplify the voices of underrepresented individuals including Black, Indigenous, persons of color, and the LGBTQIA+ community. Our team is committed to seeking equality for all and holding those in power accountable. The easiest way to support Malcontent News is to bookmark our website at malcontentnews.com, like and follow us on Facebook, subscribe to us on YouTube, and follow us on Twitter, Twitch, Instagram, and in the Google News app. To provide financial support, you can become a patron, make a one-time donation through Venmo, or link your Twitch account to your Amazon Prime account and use your free subscription to subscribe to Malcontent News. Thank you for supporting independent journalism and for being a malcontent.
You fit the profile. You're the malcontent.
Nobody wants to hear the nonsensical ravings of a loudmouth malcontent.
Antifa, fuck you! You are the biggest hypocrite on the face of the planet.
I say that you're a terrible reporter. That's what I say.